Hello and welcome to this edition of Pittsburgh Sports Memories Current Events. This is the current events portion of our podcast. We'll be talking about current events from January 18th, roughly 2025 to February 22nd, 2025. It doesn't have to be strictly Pittsburgh stuff, but we'll do some Pittsburgh stuff. We'll do some general stuff. I'm here, your co-host Steve Word. As usual, I'm joined by
Tim Hannon.
And he loves current events. Tim loves current events. All right, Tim, we'll kick it off with this. I know you didn't watch much of it, so I'll talk a lot about it. The Four Nations face-off. This was the NHL decided to scrap the All-Star game, and they went with this, which was Canada, the United States, Finland, and Sweden. And so what they did was they took the NHL players that are obviously, citizens of those countries originally, and they all put them on their respective international teams, and they played a tournament. And it ended up being a huge success. I think I saw the ratings for Canada, United States on Saturday were over 4 million. The Thursday night game, the final between Canada and the United States was over 9 million, which for hockey is insane. It's like passionate. The first game, there was 3 fights. The Kachucks, both brothers, fought all the Canadians, including Justin Trudeau. They would have brought in Don Cherry if he wasn't 90 years old and fought him. They booed the Canadian. I think it took on a different air because of all the political stuff going on, the tariffs and whatnot, and the back and forth between the two politicians and governments. And the fact that the Canadians in Montreal booed the Star Spangled Banner. So, they said they didn't like that, some of the players. And so there was a big fight. And I'm normally not a hockey fights kind of guy. I think it's kind of silly. And it did end up being, it was choreographed. But like at the time, I was like, oh, man, I really wanted to kick a Canadian's butt. But I was entertained, and it ended up being a really great game. And they had a guy, Charlie McAvoy, was awesome in that first game. And I watched that game, and I caught some of the game against Sweden, the United States, and I saw they lost because I figured they had nothing to play for because they already won 2 and they were into the final. And I to my credit, I did fall asleep because I had been up since 5 a.m. that day. I watched about 3/4 of that game, and I saw when Canada tied it. I had a feeling before the game, me and a guy at work were talking about the game, and we had a feeling that the United States had beaten Canada once in 10 years. We weren't going to beat them twice in a week. So, Sidney Crosby. And the biggest problem was that McAvoy, who was so good, because Connor McDavid was unstoppable that first game, and McAvoy just put him on his button. I think I said in another podcast, like, that you'll hear later, is physicality slows down speed, and they weren't able to be physical enough. Although we did have Connor Hellebuyck was the best goalie. It's great for hockey, good for everything, and that should help the sport. And I think everybody's really excited. I heard some people conflating it to the 1980 Miracle on Ice. No, it's not that, because we're actually professionals, we're college kids, and the professionals that we're playing are probably almost as good, if not better, than the Canadian teams. Actually, U.S. dominated Canada, which blew my mind, and they probably played them pretty close to even, and in the game they lost. So this is better than the All-Star games, the Pro Bowl, even the baseball All-Star game. Definitely the NBA All-Star game's a joke. The Pro Bowl's a joke. It's flag football and dodgeball now. So I know, Tim, you didn't get to watch much, if any of it. Would you prefer this next time it rolls around to watch this rather than any of the other All-Star events?
Yeah, for sure. And I did get to watch the championship game.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Would you say they were even, at least, which is the first time in my lifetime the United States has ever been even with Canada in hockey?
Yeah. So I always loved the Olympics, the Olympic hockey, when the NHL players played. One of the hardest moments that I ever watched was when Crosby scored the goal.
Yeah, to beat
in
us
2010, because the U.S. was so good that year with
But we had to come back from 2 goals down that
we
game.
did.
Yeah.
In that game, the championship game, the U.S. had the lead. Canada tied it. And then Austin Matthews had like 3 chances in overtime, like really good quality chances. And that Bennington, the goaltender for Canada, the Blues goalie,
Well,
just
they ripped on him. They said he was the weak link, and even in a game
yeah.
against the United States, he did look like he could be had.
Right. And Hellerbuck's a 2-time Vezina winner, so he's the better
Yeah.
goaltender. But Bennington won the cup for them a few years ago. Like he's not a
And we
slouch.
have Jake Gensel is normally Mr. Clutch in those
Yeah.
situations.
Well, and Austin Matthews, like it was just you kind of almost had to laugh a little bit because it's like you just had that Toronto Maple Leaf kind of, like, well, oh, it's a big game and I almost won, but I just didn't quite win. And then McDavid gets the goal. So that stunk. But yeah, I mean, the atmosphere in Boston for
And
that
at
championship
least
game.
we didn't boo. The Canadian national anthem
Yeah.
got lightly booed.
Yeah.
Not like the United States anthem.
No, I was
Canada.
impressed with the class of the fans in Boston. Everybody, and then like when they would pan around to the crowd, everybody had like red, white, and blue sparkly stuff on. And it was a cool moment. I don't know. Like, I agree they should do this again. They maybe every year. I don't know if it'll end up like the Winter Classic, where it's like, oh, this is so cool, and then it gets like a little
Yeah.
played out.
Well, they're doing a stadium series. They need.
Well,
to,
that's what I'm saying. I don't.
They
know.
need to get rid of some events here, like either get rid of the Winter Classic. They need to move the Winter Classic to New Year's Eve or something now. Because
but all I'm saying here is that like I think too the so either I don't know if this would be as successful in coming years just because the novelty wore off, also because of like you said, kind of the geopolitical stuff going on right now made it a little more.
Well, next year, couldn't they include the Czechs and the Russians? There's got to be enough Czechs. There's definitely enough Russians in the league
Well,
to form a team. That was a problem with the Finns. Is the Finns had like Oli Mata playing, and like I think he still plays in the league. I think does he play for Utah maybe or?
But yeah. Not having the Russians in there was silly, and I get it. Like they are the war with Ukraine, and we don't like them, but it's like.
No, they should have had them. And well, it was supposed to be the countries that are rivalries, and obviously
right.
Canada and U.S. big rivalry. Finns and Sweden, there's a big rivalry. Although the Finns and Russians are just as big a rivalry, and definitely the Czechs and the Russians, that's a big rivalry.
I think because of the success of this, I wouldn't be surprised to see them expand it to 6 instead of 4. I'm not sure how you do a round robin in that case. Maybe you have to make it 8. I don't know if you have enough countries to do that, but yeah, like you said, good for the league, fun to watch.
Yeah. Moving on, the next one. Sticking with hockey. Pens. Do the Penguins make the playoffs, Tim? They've played 57 games. They have 55 points. Let me see. I think Detroit has 61. Ottawa has 62. FanDuel, for just purely informational purposes, please don't waste your money, has them at plus 1,500. The New York Times has them at a 4% chance of making the playoffs. Tim, tell me, you're saying, just like was it Dumb and Dumber? So you're saying I got a chance.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, and I don't really want them to. Like we're in this era of Pittsburgh sports where everybody's in the mushy middle, and
so somebody needs to suck.
Somebody needs to suck and just say, you know what, we're gonna next year team's gonna stink, and in 2 or 3 years hopefully we'll get better. And I know that's so hard to do with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang all approaching their endpoint, but I don't know what else you do. You can't just keep and I think that's honestly that is what they're Kyle Dubas is doing that.
Well, there were remember the Red Wings went through this like when they're at the end there with all their guys from the Cup run, and they wouldn't let anybody go.
Right.
Like they stunk. And
the Blackhawks did it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of hope they don't make the playoffs, and then I hope they just start,
rebuilding.
Just start rebuilding at this point. And
well, I read an article. Malkin wants to retire with Pittsburgh. He doesn't want to play anywhere else.
He does. He doesn't want to go back to Russia.
Yeah, his parents still live in Magnitogorsk. He does not want to go back there and play. He wants to stay in Pittsburgh. I think he lives in Florida. I don't think he'll retire to Pittsburgh, but he wants to at least retire with the Penguins.
And it's not like those guys stink. Like Malkin and Crosby are still decent players. It's not like they stink and they're dragging everybody down. It's just that just like with Ben when the Steelers still had Ben, it's like, oh, but this guy only has a few years left, so we can't just be terrible. We have to at least be semi-competitive because we have these guys, and that's the
Yeah.
wrong mentality to have. They just need to stink, like you said.
So, all right. So, bottom out for the Penguinis. All right, got you, Tim. No, I don't think ticket salespeople are like that. Should that be their ticket slogan? Come see the Penguins. We stink.
I think the one thing to look forward to the rest of the season, there's a very slim chance of this, but Ovechkin is probably going to break Gretzky's goal record, and the
Is that
Capitals.
all time? That's all time,
That's
isn't
all
it?
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
jeez.
and the Capitals play in Pittsburgh
I
in April. I think
yeah.
in late April, I believe. So there is a small chance that he could have a chance to break the record here, which I think would be super cool. That's about it for looking forward to the rest of the season for me.
I wonder if tickets are cheap. I haven't gone to a hockey game in a long time.
I actually
Probably.
haven't been to one this year. I usually go to several a year, and I this is the first year probably since the pandemic year that I haven't been to a game.
Yeah. How about a Super Bowl blowout, Tim? It sounds like a hairstyle. Did your wife like blow out her hair for the Super Bowl? Like, no, that's what happened to the Kansas City Chefs. Yeah, I did not see that coming. I thought that would be a competitive. I knew the Eagles were good, having seen them play against the Steelers, but man, they just took the Chiefs behind the woodshed and gave them a whooping. And you know what? They didn't have to blitz, and I think that's the thing with when Patrick Mahomes like looks average is when you don't have to blitz, and then he starts doing that Brett Favre. He looked like Brett Favre, like throwing
Yeah,
that interception to who's that Blankenship or no, it was the white safety from the Eagles.
right, right.
Because he does that all the time. He throws across his body, across the middle, and he gets away with it. And finally, someone made him pay. And I'm not an Eagles fan. I don't like the Eagles all that much, particularly, but good for Kenny Pickett. He really didn't do anything. He was along for the ride. He did help them win one game this season.
He got into the Super Bowl too, so
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hey, good for him. I mean, and Jalen Hurts, is he like a Dak Prescott, just kind of like a mediocre player on a really good team? I don't know.
I think he's better than that. But he's definitely he's that team was really built well, and like that Super Bowl to me was like just dripping with so much history because in the history of that game, when you have a team like that with really good defensive line, it doesn't matter who you play. And that's why like Jim Kelly led teams and John Elway led teams and even Tom Brady the year he was undefeated and now Patrick Mahomes, that's why those teams lose the Super Bowl to a team with a really solid defense
And
or
a decent quarterback. Like you can't have a
yeah, of
total.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but
Unless you're the
that's
Ravens that one year. I mean, but that's like more of an outlier.
it was, but I mean that's what happens in the Super Bowl. And so it wasn't, you're right. I didn't see a blowout
Is
coming.
Jalen Hurts like? I hate to focus on the quarterback, but is he like a Jeff Hostetler, like a Mark
No,
Rippon?
I
I
think
think
he's
he's
better than
better
that.
than them, right? He's not like who's the guy from Tampa that won? Brad Richards? Was that his
Brad
name?
Johnson.
Brad Johnson. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he's better than those
Well,
guys.
he's already been to two Super Bowls, and those guys all went to one. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think he's good. You're right. He's going to be one of those guys that, unless his career trajectory really changes, he'll be in that like borderline Hall of Fame kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Probably not really a Hall of Famer.
He has that really good play, that tush push that is on, and it's really only unstoppable with him because they
Yeah.
tried to run it with other quarterbacks.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Really, yeah, it really
Yeah.
is. He really does make that play go. Speaking of quarterbacks in the NFL, do the Steelers want to have one next year? I mean, and what's up with the crazy rumors? I remember there was another year where they had just every crazy rumor. It was like it's like, okay, they're going to get Matthew Stafford. People aren't available. They're going to get Trevor Lawrence, this guy, the ghost of Johnny Unitas. They're going to make it up to him. Len Dawson. Come on, man. They got to keep Justin Fields, right? I'm assuming Russell Wilson is going to go to Oakland or not Oakland, Vegas. I assume he's going to go to the Raiders, right?
Here's the options because you have one quarterback under contract. It's Kyle Allen.
It's a starter. Kyle Allen, Super Bowl baby.
I guess option one is Kyle Allen's your starter. That's not going to happen. So your options are you you re-sign Justin Fields,
which makes the most sense to me.
which makes the most sense.
Yeah.
You go, if you don't do that, you go get somebody out of free agency or a trade. There's nobody. If you look at the list, it's nobody.
Kirk Cousins. What are we gonna get? Kirk Cousins?
No, you don't want Kirk Cousins.
Stafford. They keep saying we'll never get Stafford. He's
and if you even if you did get Stafford, let's just say you did.
He's like 2 or 3 years. You're like at the Ben part of his career.
Well, that's Russ. I mean, you might as well just re-sign Russ if you're going to go out and trade for Stafford, because you'd have to trade for him.
Yeah.
So there's really no better option. Drafting somebody you really can't do. I mean, I kind of like the kid from Miami, Cam Ward, but we're not going to get him.
He's going to go too early.
Yeah, he's going to go too early. I do like him. He's very Ben-like. You know, he's tall. He's got that big arm. He's escapable in the pocket. He throws interceptions, but he could probably be coached out of that. But there's no way we're going to get him. So it's like, yeah, that's your best option. I'm not like hugely excited about it, but at least Fields has a ceiling where Russ and Kirk Cousins at this point in his career and Aaron Rodgers.
Well, at least he could bridge us for like 3 or 4 years till maybe we get bad enough where we could actually draft a quarterback.
Well, and that's what I think that's the best bet. Sign Fields. If he's terrible, then draft somebody next year.
Yeah.
Or the year after. Like it's your best bet. Like, it's not the greatest bet, but it's the best.
I wonder if the Steelers aren't falling into, like, you know, how they're in this mushy middle. They are where the Dolphins were with Marino, and I think I said this before. Like they get 8 wins every year, and it's really not doing them any favors.
Yeah. It's and I do think, like, everybody's like, oh, you just got to suck. It's like, I don't think you have to suck. I think Omar Khan is doing a decent enough job starting to rebuild post Ben. He's only had 2 years to do it. I think some of the draft picks are starting to pan out, but they do need a quarterback, and who's that going to be? And that's the tough part.
So finishing up with, I guess we should have like the Oscars. We'd have like an in memorandum section. Firstly, sad news. 2 local media legends died this week, Tim. John Burnett, I don't know if you remember him. He was a local weatherman. He actually played football at the University of Tennessee, believe it or not. He hosted a show called PM Magazine in the 80s with a lady named Liz Miles. Then he did Pittsburgh Today with Patrice King Brown. He was kind of a goofball, nice guy, did weather for a long time after the Pittsburgh Today thing went away. Just really likable. And from everything I read, they said he lit up a room, like just really generally nice and likable guy. And on the sports front, a major loss. And there were actually Mike Lange passed away. And there was actually I saw the New York Times and New York Post both posted articles and tributes to Mike Lange. So in honor of that, what is your favorite Mike Lange catchphrase?
I think mine is Great Balls of Fire.
I was like, scratch my back with a hacksaw. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool. Or smile like a butcher's dog. And anything you remember about John Burnett? Do you remember him vaguely?
I remember Pittsburgh Today. I remember that with Patrice King Brown. Yeah,
they did that had to be 10 years.
Yeah. I do remember that. Yeah, so he's another guy. I mean,
CTE. They're saying CTE with John Burnett.
Yeah, from his football days. Yeah, and Mike Lange, I mean, he's just the voice of so many of our memories,
Well, you hear him through our podcasts. Anytime we do a Penguins highlight, we've even done some Pirates highlights.
Yes, that's true. So yeah, that's a big loss.
We'll be missed.
He will be absolutely missed.
Well, that's it for our current events. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our segment. Keep giving us likes on Facebook. Send us a message if there's anything you want us to cover. Maybe next current events, we'll be able to cover it. This is a good forum for that if you have any comments. If you do make a comment, we'll definitely respond to it the next one if you can. So check us out on Facebook or Instagram, wherever you do. You can get some interaction. That would be fun. And we'll talk to you next time here on the Pittsburgh Sports Memories Podcast Current Events.